Well, hello and welcome to the first ever episode of our SwanBank podcast. My name's Sam and I'm joined this week by the very wonderful
Kathryn Stevens.
Very good, well done, very good.
Thank you, Sam.
The first task is to remember your name.
Excellent.
Did that very well.
I did that well.
How you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Sam.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good.
I am. I'm good. I'm a bit up and down. Every day's a bit different, but today is okay. Thank you.
We decided that we thought it'd be a good idea to do a podcast. We're not really sure why or how it's going to go, but we're going to see what happens. We're going to chat about some stuff that's been going on from week to week, and if people listen, we'll carry on. If nobody cares, then we'll probably stop, and we'll see what happens. So what's going on for you at the moment, Kathryn?
Well, this week has been my husband Lloyd's birthday.
Wonderful.
And so I cooked him a special meal yesterday.
Very nice. What did you cook?
What do you think I cooked?
I don't know, something like Geordie, maybe.
Something Geordie.
Something Geordie. Is that a thing? Are you Geordie? Is that how...
Yeah, near enough. I'm
right.
kind of Northumbrian, really.
Is a Mackham
No,
a thing?
I'm not a Mackham.
What's a Mackham?
Mackham's someone from Sunderland.
Okay.
And
But you've literally just come from Sunderland.
I know. And I was there for 11 years, but I was not
okay,
a Mackham.
Fine.
Mm-mm.
Right, okay.
No. So Geordie is near enough.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I didn't.
So is that a bit like
Geordie.
telling somebody from Stoke that they're from Newcastle? Is
It's worse.
Worse than that? Okay,
yeah,
fine.
it's worse than that. Definitely. Yeah. Goodness
This is a
me.
good start.
Wow.
Great.
Yeah. So I cooked him a burger.
Very nice.
Burger and wedges. It was really nice. And I
Nice.
bought him a roulade for pudding. I didn't even make a cake.
A roulade. That's great.
Yeah.
You can tell he's of a certain age.
He was very happy though.
Good. Because
with
you
it.
guys are big foodies, aren't you?
Yeah, we are. We like our food. We do. It's one of the
Yeah.
things that we really like doing. Is it, really fortunate to be able to have meals out sometimes,
Yeah,
and that's the thing that we like doing. So
Yeah.
we can't do any of that at the minute.
Yeah. What's your favourite type of food to go out for?
If it was my last meal,
okay.
without a doubt, if you asked me what was my last meal,
Yeah,
without
yeah.
a doubt, I'd go for a curry.
Really?
I love a curry.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
My wife Alicia bought me an Indian cookbook for Christmas.
Oh.
So I've been experimenting at home.
You should bring some in the office.
Maybe. It's the sort of curry that you can't eat the day before you have to go out and do anything or see anyone.
You can't
'cause
really
just,
see anybody.
You just stink. Yeah, it's
Do you
grim.
sweat curry?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
no.
a little bit. So you had a nice birthday meal with Lloyd.
Yes.
Anything else interesting going on?
I bought him an Alexa.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah. So he's just getting used to it.
Wow. What's the weirdest thing he's done with the Alexa so far?
Well, funnily enough, we asked Alexa to put on some spa music last night, right? It was really funny. I laughed my head off because
some
it's
spa music.
Yeah, some quiet, peaceful spa music, but it started with a sea shanty.
Wow.
So it was very funny.
Great.
Yeah,
Just
I'm
the
not
mood
sure.
you were going for.
I know,
Sea shanty.
It was very
Great.
bizarre.
I'm sure Jamie was very pleased with that. Great. You've already touched on, things being a bit up and down. How have you found lockdown?
Oh, how have I found lockdown? I mean, I am so aware, Sam, that I've had it easy compared to lots of people. Do you know? I really am aware of that. But even saying that, I've found these last few weeks really hard.
Yeah.
I think this latest lockdown has affected me more than anything before. I feel like the longevity of it, how long this has gone on now, we're almost a year, aren't we?
Yeah.
As it just is taking its toll a bit, really.
Yeah.
So I think that when there's anything really good happens, it feels extra good.
Yeah.
And when there's something a bit negative happens, it feels extra bad.
Yeah.
So the extremes of emotions, I think,
Yeah,
is kind of where I'm sitting at the minute. What about you?
It's very similar, to be fair. It's trying to seek out those good things that are going on.
Yeah.
And not getting sort of overwhelmed and consumed by all the
Yeah.
this rubbish that is going on. It's a bit dull, isn't it? There's not very much to do.
No, there's not. There's not.
I mean, I'm very similar to you. Like going out for food, it's probably one of the things that me and Alicia spend the most time doing.
Yeah.
And or things that those sort of things that you put so much time and energy into and love doing so much.
Yeah.
For them still to be not is really hard.
Yeah.
And also, I have a niece who is 7 months old,
Mm-hmm.
who we were able to see a little bit over the summer.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen her since
Oh,
November, which is very sad.
that's rubbish, isn't it?
And I feel like the opportunity for me to be the favourite uncle is just like slipping away.
Do you think you would have been the favourite uncle?
100%. And I
Really?
still think I can bring it back.
Gosh.
Yeah, so...
Okay. Let me know
We'll
how
see.
you get on
Thank
with that.
you.
So.
Yeah, we'll have weekly reports about how that's going.
Excellent.
Lovely Ellie. One of the things we thought we'd do with this podcast is to just maybe think about some of the things that we've seen on the news in the week that have really struck a chord, that we feel like have really stood out amongst the rest of the stories. So, Kathryn, what's the thing this week that has really struck a chord with you as you've been watching and listening to the news?
I think actually it was. I was watching the news last night, and obviously the news picked up that that Captain Tom has died. And obviously we traced his story, didn't we? And you know, hoping to raise, how much was it he wanted to raise to start with, like £1,000 or something like that, and ended up raising 30 million,
amazing,
which is just the most amazing story. We spoke about that on a Sunday night once, didn't we?
It was quite early on in the whole lockdown picture. He was the sort of first good news story that came out, wasn't he?
Yeah. And just, I mean, that is just amazing.
Yeah.
And I was just chatting at home about how, obviously, on the one hand, how utterly sad it is.
Yeah.
And obviously went to hospital, I think, with pneumonia, but then caught COVID, and so COVID's tied up in it, isn't it? With it, which is often the case for people. And a bit of the irony, really, that he'd raised all this money for the NHS and then he ended up having to be in hospital himself. But a recognition, you know, that he was 100 years old, that is a remarkable age, isn't it, to reach, and how he must have felt this last year, really, in you know, I guess at that age, at 99, just that. There must be lots of things that you're unable to do and unable to engage with, but actually for him to walk around his garden, to suddenly realise that he's raised all this massive amount of money, and to visit the Queen, and to you know, all of those things that happen. I mean, what a way to end your life in a sense. I mean, that's quite remarkable. But I think as I was watching the news, and so they reported it, and then they had like the home correspondent in the studio, doing a whole thing, and I'm thinking, gosh, is this the focus of our news today? And that it just asked a few questions in my head about why and what's behind that, really.
What do you think that sort of uncertainty? Where's that come from when you watch that? Because it is a really it's a good news story, almost telling the story of his life, but there is that tinge of almost uncertainty and a bit of being a bit unsure about it. What do you think that is about?
I don't know. I started to think about it, and firstly, I was thinking, is there, because there didn't seem to be much news came out of the news last night, actually.
Okay.
And I was thinking, I wonder what else is going on that we're not hearing about. Maybe that's the suspicious side of me. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think there's a bit of that in all of us. I think that's okay. I think that's loud.
But I think also just thinking about why we would focus so much in on that story, and is it just simply that there's an inbuilt desire within us to want to focus on something positive in what is a really negative time in our history, isn't it, really? And focusing on something that's good, and that looks at what kindness really looks like in a person, and wanting to honour someone's life. Which that's all good stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think it did leave me with a few questions as well, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
What about you?
Because I guess there's the bit of the story that's not being told there is the fact that there was 1,400 other people who died yesterday from COVID. I guess is one of the things that makes you go, I recognise that this guy has been such a good news story for us. But I also recognise that there are 1,399 other people whose names won't be mentioned.
Right, yeah.
And so there's and I'm not saying at all that it's wrong for us to make a thing of Captain Tom. It's how we still honour and respect and treat the other 1,399 in a Christ-like way and have the sort of compassion that Jesus would want us to have on those people as well, I think.
Yeah. And I don't know whether there's something about sometimes people become a bit of a focal point for celebrating goodness.
Yeah, for sure.
Or actually yesterday's news, a focal point both for celebrating the goodness that we've seen Captain Tom work in this last year, but also, in his passing, that maybe pulls together a sense of communal grief. Possibly. So while the larger number of people who've passed away, they weren't mentioned by name, I just wonder whether there's something. I do think there's something permission giving. That when we focus some kind of grief in a situation or a person in this case, then actually it becomes permission giving for us to express wider corporate grief, which I think is going to be massive beyond COVID. I think the fallout from grief and from people not being able to say goodbye to loved ones properly, not be able to have funerals properly, and all of those kind of things, I think is going to take some unpicking.
That's sort of a side of your ministry here that other people don't see very much of, is the working with families who are approaching funerals. What has that been like, particularly over these last few months? Has there been, obviously there's differences in how the funerals happen, but has there been a different way you've had to engage with the families in dealing with grief?
Absolutely. I mean, practical things, just like it's, I can't go around to someone's house and sit in a room full of family members and talk to them like I would often do. So in the first lockdown, actually everything was done either FaceTime or on the telephone. So I'd get to a funeral, and then of course we couldn't have a funeral in the church then either, so it was at the crematorium with 10 people. But you'd get to the crematorium or the graveside, and you'd have to seek out people and think, right, does that person look like the person I spoke to on the phone? And actually introduce yourself properly, so the first time you physically met someone is actually 2 minutes before the funeral service begins. And that's not how you want to go about how you do things. I mean, I take my pastoral ministry, my funeral ministry really seriously. It's a really important part of my calling, and you only get one chance to get a funeral right, so it really matters. So I put a lot of time and energy into my preparations for funerals, and not to be able to engage with families in the way you would usually do is actually really quite tough. We do the best we can, but it's not ideal. And Sam, I've had a lot of funerals over these last couple of months. And just conversation after conversation after conversation with families who've just shared the pain of not being able to say goodbye to their loved ones in the way they'd want to, or not being able to see their loved ones as often as they usually would, or waving to them through a window, and just being called in at the last moment to be able to say their goodbyes. I mean, that's just utterly heartbreaking.
And what we had one of our members, Shirley, on the sofa with us on Sunday evening, and she spoke about her experience of being a bank nurse over the last few months, and being on COVID wards with these very elderly and frail people, and having to almost be the family members for these people who haven't been able to have family come and say goodbye and all that sort of stuff. It just is a real... that's almost the side of the story you don't hear on the news, and you see the pictures of the COVID wards where everyone's in full on hazmat suits type. That's what it looks like, doesn't it? But then it's actually those really alone moments where it may be just a nurse and a patient, and they're
standing in the breach really between family and the individual. I mean,
definitely.
What a hard but in a sense privileged place to be as well. And I think Shirley expressed some of that.
And one of the phrases she used was about having she felt like Jesus had given her such a compassion for these people that it almost hurt. And that's that's such an inspiring story, and an inspiring way to approach these people who are otherwise just on their own, aren't they? And I guess you're doing a similar thing in coming alongside these funeral families in trying to step into a gap where they haven't been able to see others to comfort them in their grief or even process that.
Absolutely. And even just to, so often my conversations with them have begun with just general conversation around their journey, really, because I think for people to be able to just share that and articulate that is actually a really important thing to be able to do. To be able to get some of that frustration and sadness out and voice it to someone like me who perhaps stands independent of any of that process really is quite important.
Definitely.
So I've wanted to make sure that I've carved out some really good quality time to be with people.
Wow. So we are super inspired by Captain Tom. We think he has done amazing things. And we are really grateful for not only the amount of money he's raised, but I feel there's like a bit of a galvanizing thing that he's managed to do on communities all around the UK and around the world. But there's also a challenge in the midst of that to not forget the thousands upon thousands of other stories that are like his, but maybe don't get the same profile, and all those other names of people who have really sadly passed away, and families that are dealing with grief. And there's a real challenge for us as the church, as Christians, to be alongside those people, I guess, isn't there?
Absolutely.
In the midst of this, in what are really difficult days. First podcast done and dusted.
Excellent.
Have you had a nice time?
Yes, it's been great. It's been good to chat.
We hope you've enjoyed listening. We hope you've been inspired, maybe challenged, and we'll be back maybe next week, maybe the week after. Who knows? Maybe never again with another episode of the SwanBank podcast. So thank you for listening. We'll see you very soon.